Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Duke Wisdom Podcast. Ben McCormick here with Clinton Weaver. Talk about two different Duke basketball games, one much more exciting than the other, and also a lot of Duke football news from bowl games to transfer portal entries. A lot to talk about there, but let's go ahead and start with the basketball team. Let's start with not the game that just happened. Let's start with the more exciting one. Let's tip off on a good note. Duke played its first conference game at Louisville on Sunday, a game in which it trailed by 14 at a point in the first half, but ended up pulling out a gutsy win. This is one that I was not able to watch live as it happened. It was my one of my best friend's birthdays, and as good a friend as I am, I decided not to religiously have the Duke basketball game on at dinner. So that's, you ever need a friend like me. But I was happy to go back and watch it and see a sort of mini recreation of the 2019 comeback to a much smaller scale and over a much larger amount of time. Not such a concentrated comeback, but a very impressive one nonetheless. We talked time and time again about how this was a trap game for Duke coming off a win against Auburn. This is a first road game in the ACC. I think like 10 out of the last 13 coming into that one. Duke had lost its first road game in conference play. So this is a massive win and a big testament, I think, to this team's character and its will and determination to get wins. As someone who did watch it live, Clinton, what did you see during that game? What impressed you the most? What were your impressions?
Well, the strange thing to conclude from that game is that maybe Duke sometimes is better off when Cooper Flagg is sitting on the bench, because that's exactly what happened. He went to the bench, and Malik Brown sort of took over the game and turned things around almost single-handedly with his defensive performance. And I think it also helped Cooper to take a little breather because when he came back, he really helped salt the game away. But honestly, the turning point seemed to be right then and there when Cooper went out and Duke kind of came together as a team and decided that they were going to change the direction of the game, and they did.
But you can imagine it was much to my confusion when me not watching the game sees the end score, goes on the box score to pick the player of the game. Very clear choice from the box score is Cooper Flagg, 20 points, 12 rebounds. I post that, and then Clinton, you and a couple of others are like, no, actually, it probably should be Malik Brown. And I go back, I look at the box, and I'm like, well, I mean, 11 rebounds is good, but 6 points. And I'm like, well, I know Malik doesn't score. So I knew that I was in for a Malik Brown masterpiece defensively when I went back and watched it. And I mean, again, so many deflections, just imposing his defensive will on the game in every aspect. Just such a valuable player, and I think has at least for anybody paying any attention as an ACC voter, should have squarely put himself in the lead for Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, I would imagine the only guy even giving him a run for his money is his own teammate, Cooper Flagg, because Cooper has those defensive counting stats. But what Malik doesn't really always show up on that box, but man, does it have a massive impact. And, Duke really missed him, I think, today against Incarnate Word, but he'll be back soon, and he had just a massive impact on that Louisville win. So, I mean, Clinton, we've talked plenty about Malik's defense, but what made his effort against Louisville different than what he's already done so far?
I don't know that it was anything different. It was really more of the same. To me, he's looking like a Battier level defender. I've made that comparison before. He's got such great hands. I think if anything what stood out as being a little different, he was able to convert some of these steals and deflections into fast breaks that went the other way for points, including some of his own points. And yeah, it was definitely his best game so far, and exactly what the doctor ordered under those circumstances, because we were pushing a rock uphill pretty much for the first 30 minutes of that game.
Yeah, so let's talk about the starts. because it's sort of getting to a point where I think early in this season, I talked about how this just wasn't a first half team. They did not perform in the first half, and everybody pushed back on me. They were like, "All right, come on, man. It's been 3 games. It's been 4 games, but a trend is a trend." And now I think it's not just a trend; it's a problem because Duke dug a hole against Kentucky a little bit early. Definitely dug that hole against Kansas. Dug that hole against Auburn. Dug that hole against Louisville, a 14-point game, and one can even argue dug a little bit of a hole tonight against Incarnate Word. I mean, that hole didn't actually put them in a deficit, but it put them in a much closer game than they should have been in. And so these first half starts are just it's getting old quick. What do you think they need to do to combat this?
Well, hot off the press from the game tonight, the big thing that they were doing was jacking up threes instead of trying to get the ball into the paint and working from the inside out. In the second half, that's exactly what they did. They started getting it inside. Maluach had a big game as a result of finally starting to do that because they had a huge height advantage over Incarnate Word. They just weren't taking advantage of it. They were settling on the outside. It was kind of lazy basketball. And they paid the price because they were clanging those 3-pointers. I think there was something like 2 out of 13 at the half from 3. And the team looks totally different. If they're jacking up threes and they're not going in, it's a whole different thing than when they are. But once they figured out to touch paint first and then hit those 3-point shooters who are relocating on the outside, then everything started to click.
Let's talk about that jacking up of threes. Cooper Flagg on the season right now is 24% from 3. Now that was coming into today. He shot 0 of 3 from 3 today, so I imagine that dropped to closer to an even 20. Con Knipple has been shooting just 33% from 3 coming into the day, and now 33 on its face value isn't like horrific, but I think as a 3-point specialist, that raises some red flags. He was 2 of 4 today, so that percentage likely will improve slightly. But just not great splits. I mean, Caleb Foster from 3, 32%, right? Deion James's 35 isn't bad. It's not great. Mason Gillis, 28%. I mean, that's a guy that came in shooting 47% from 3 at Purdue last season. Malik Brown's not a high-volume shooter, but just 20%, 1 of 5 on the season. I mean, when you look at these percentages, the only guys that have impressed are Tyrese Proctor coming into today was 43%. Isaiah Evans coming into the day, 46%. So outside of those two guys, I don't think we can argue anymore that poor shooting is an anomaly for every game that it happens. I think it's actually kind of becoming the measuring stick that this team's falling short as a 3-point shooting team. Do you think that's something that they need to just kind of work around, find different ways to score more frequently? Or do you honestly believe that 3-point shooting is going to make a significant jump, enough so that you're not concerned?
Well, I think it depends on how they get those threes. And tonight was just a great demonstration of that. When they're taking them in rhythm and the flow of the offense, when they're working the ball from the inside out, it just feels different. It feels like they're going to go in because they're being taken in the rhythm and flow of the game. Whereas like in the first half, it was pass the ball around the perimeter and somebody shoot it. And it didn't feel like they were being taken in the flow. So, I mean, they've proven they're capable, and Isaiah had a good night tonight with, I think, 4 threes he ended up with. So he bounced back nicely from the Louisville game where he had kind of a flat outing. Yeah, but it is a bit puzzling because at the start of the season, what we saw was a team filled with shooters. And that has not necessarily proven to be the case.
Well, kind of on a similar note, I mean, let's look at Con Knipple, another guy that started the season looking like, I mean, this is not only was he being projected as a top 5 draft pick, but everybody was thinking, could this guy lead the team in scoring? And it seemed pretty viable that was a possibility, leading the team in scoring in that 56-point throttling of Arizona State. He looked great in the first few games of the season, but here we are, and Con's point per game average is down to 12. He's had a 12-point game, a 10-point game here in the last couple of outings, but honestly, it's been inefficient games, kind of no-show games for Con Knippel offensively. Do you think that maybe the beginning of the season was him getting his hot spell out of the way, sort of like maybe not exactly a one-for-one comparison, but sort of like how Trevor Keels did at the beginning of his freshman season, and you think that kind of that 12-point per game average we're seeing out of Con is probably more accurate to what we're actually going to get, or do you think he's in a slump and he's going to get that average back up and we're going to see more 18-point Con Knippel games?
Well, I think he'll start to hit more threes. Teams will have already probably started to game plan for him, due to the early attention that he was getting as a shooter. And, he has to adjust his game. I think he has. He's started to go inside more, and he's able to finish pretty well around the basket. He's a very smart player, and he uses his body well to get open for looks around the basket. So he's got more to his game than just 3-point shooting. And he definitely, in terms of assist making, he was a big asset on the floor against Louisville. And so he's contributing in other ways. Every freshman goes through struggles. They hit a wall, and then they bust through that wall. So I'm expecting him to rebound.
Want to join a community of Duke accounts publishing news, theories, and predictions on Duke athletics? Join the Duke Wisdom Network. Just go to dukewisdom.org/join network today and fill out the form with your name and social media. Or you can DM at Duke_Wisdom on Twitter or Instagram. Become a part of the community of Duke fans publishing their takes today. Again, that's dukewisdom.org/join network to DM at Duke_Wisdom on Twitter or Instagram.
I think that, this team just has so many scoring weapons that they haven't really established a pecking order, I suppose, offensively. It's difficult to tell, like, who's supposed to be guy number 2 offensively, guy number 3. You have Cooper, who's often the leading scorer, but then from that point forward, you're looking at 12 a game from Tyrese, 12 a game from Con, roughly 9 from Caleb, 8 for Sion, 8 for Isaiah, 7 for Common. It's so distributed, so much more than most Duke teams I think we're used to. So it's difficult to kind of manage what our expectations should be offensively. And especially because it just changes so much on a day-to-day. And a great example of that is Mr. Flagg's contributions today, right? I've talked time and time again about what Cooper does, what Cooper needs to do for Duke to win offensively. Well, apparently all he needed was 6 points today. I mean, it seems like anytime a non-Power 5 opponent comes into Cameron Indoor Stadium, Cooper Flagg sort of yawns and just goes, all right, guess I don't really have to do a lot today. Not that he's not trying, but it seems like it's not the same offensive mindset for Cooper Flagg. Have you seen that same difference in him?
Well, tonight I think his minutes were limited quite a bit. The rotations were extended deeper. He definitely had less time on the floor. He really wasn't needed. I think the team has sort of hit a wall in terms of the schedule and being a bit worn out. And I think John Shire knows that. So he gave Cooper some very long rests on the bench tonight. You might see more of that again next week against George Mason. And that's okay, The kid can take a couple of nights off and get refreshed and ready for the big run through the ACC. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I was glad to see Maluach lead the team in scoring for a change. It's part of the balanced attack we have that you don't know on a given night who the leading scorer might be.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about Cooper Flagg's being the leading scorer night to night. The only downside to it is like, man, come on, dude. You're trying to win ACC Player of the Year and be a first-team All-American here. Help a fan base out. Like, cut it out with the 6-point games. But other than that, it's not actually concerning. Like, you get the win, you get the win. And if he doesn't need to go for 20, he doesn't. And, we've said that time and time again. And to kind of touch on something else you said, I mean, there's a reason that they scheduled Incarnate Word on December 10th, right? December 10th, exam season, right after the Auburn Louisville kind of back-to-back tough games. You're heading into the holiday season where guys get to go home. Their mind isn't entirely on basketball around this time of the year. And so, the student section's not even full. Like there's reasons why Incarnate Word is the team they laced them up against today, because their mind is kind of a little bit adrift. And if they were playing Auburn today, Auburn likely would have beaten their brakes off, quite frankly. So, there's a reason why they had that game. A very uninspiring first half, especially today, but a solid second half, a solid rebuttal. 44 points in the second half isn't anything to be mad about. That 25 in the second half for Incarnate Word mostly happening there kind of in garbage time. I think for Duke, Isaiah Evans might be the best garbage time scorer I've seen in a Duke jersey since Grayson Allen in his freshman season. I mean, nobody better at just putting up a crazy 14 to 20 points at the end of the game for no good reason. But that's just the tale of a hot shooter with a lot of talent. So I mean, there's certainly a comparison there. The moxie and kind of the ego there for Isaiah is probably a little similar to Grayson as well, and I hope he ends up having that same kind of career trajectory. But I think the story of the game, and you talked about him, was Maluach, right? Before this game even started, before I even knew that Malik Brown wasn't gonna be playing today, this screamed Maluach breakout game, right? 6'9" is the tallest player that Incarnate Word has, and if you're 6'9" playing at Incarnate Word, you're probably not that good of a 6'9" player. That was pretty much the case. And so to me, it was like, feed him, find ways to get Maluach involved offensively, because this guy, I hate the way that he just falls back and fades into the background offensively. Because, yes, he's had his defensive hiccups, like he's out of position sometimes. He'll goaltend more than you'd want a high level shot blocker to do, but he's young. That's going to happen. He's still got the raw ability to be that defender. He's making mistakes, and that's going to happen. Frankly, I think he has the ability to make up for it on the offensive end. I mean, he has just tremendous hands. I mean, very, very, very seldom does he ever get thrown the ball and he doesn't catch it, and very seldom does he put the ball up at the basket and miss. He missed a dunk today that was just an insane miss that went all the way through the basket and popped back out. But he seldom misses. He seldom misses catches. This is a guy, I think, that can put the ball on the floor. He can shoot jump shots. Some Duke fans might be tentative to say, oh, don't let him do that, don't let him do that, because Duke just doesn't give the green light to guys like that to do things like that. But the truth about Maluach is that he can do things like that. I've seen him do things like that. He just hasn't done them, and he hasn't been involved in the offense in ways that I would like him to be. I don't think he should be treated like a Derek Lively. I think Derek Lively should have got more touches offensively at Duke, but I don't think Maluach should be treated like he's Derek Lively, because I think there's so much more to his offensive skill set than Derek. And so today, finally, and maybe not even in the first half, I think there were plenty of moments where he was really open on cuts, and that zone defense that Incarnate Word was playing, they could have got him the ball so many more times, and ultimately just kind of elected not to. But he could have got the ball a lot more in that first half. But you could see a very conscious decision by John Shire at halftime. He told everybody, get Kaman the ball. Let him go to work. Let him dunk it down, use his size effectively. I just want to see a much more diverse attack from Maluach offensively. I think he is the key to opening up this offense. He's one of the most talented players on this roster, and I think today was a good, positive step in the direction of utilizing him as such.
Well, a few things that I think affected that. One, when Cooper was not in the game, that gave Kaman more room to operate. And then not having Malik around meant more minutes for him as well. And then, if you're a coach with half a brain, the game plan should have been to get the ball into Kaman, because we had a huge size advantage. We needed to exploit that. And we finally did, as you said, in the second half. The things that I think he needs work on. Yes, he has good hands, and he's a good shooter. Shoots his free throws very well, which is a sign of a good shooter. Sometimes he brings the ball down low, which negates his size advantage. So if you can almost touch the rim standing flat-footed, if you hold the ball up there, I'm pretty sure nobody's going to be able to get it. And he needs to learn to do that. And in general, he just needs to be a little stronger with the ball around the basket, hang out in the dunker spot, wait for those opportunities because, like you said, they're there, and his teammates need to do a better job of finding him. And maybe that will free up the offense a little bit.
Yeah, I think that just because right now there's so much playing, from the outside in, and you've seen that from a lot of all of John Shire's first teams, right? I mean, Derek Lively, they struggled to get him involved offensively. When they found him, it was just on like one or two lob actions a game, max. And most of his points honestly came off of offensive rebound putbacks. Now, Derek's not as skilled as an offensive player. I said that before. And then the other big you really had under Shire is Kyle Filipowski, who's not really much of a big at all. He's more so just a tall guard. That's kind of the way he plays. Like, he can play and did play on the block some, but it's not really his true game. But with Maluach, this is the first time that Duke has had a true skilled big offensively. And I guess that big in terms of like he actually plays down low. And so I think that John and company, they're kind of figuring it out. And much like Maluach is just figuring out how he wants to play his own game. He's so young and new to the game of basketball that I think, yeah, he's still trying to figure out what he does. But I can just tell from watching him that there's so much that they can get out of him that they're just not getting out of him. And I think they could have buried Incarnate Word in the first half if they had gotten him more looks. Because it was so simple, right? They cut the lead down to 3, and then the ultimate answer to get it back out to 7 right before halftime was him. The answer to extend the lead right out of halftime in the second half was him. He was just the answer to everything. Like, guards can't get it going, threes aren't falling, offense looks sloppy, tired. Use what your advantage is, right? And I think against so many teams this season, that advantage might be Maluach, because not many teams have a guy that can hang with him, height-wise, length-wise. And so I think as they develop him offensively and defensively, so it's easier to keep him on the floor for long periods, I really want to see him become one of the highest used players offensively. He doesn't have to be a player that feeding on the block, but he's a guy that should get the ball, or they should be looking to get the ball at least most possessions. And so I was happy, at least somewhat, with his involvement today. I think it could have been higher, but I was happy with it to a degree. Not a ton else from everybody else, if we're being honest. I think the other guy I want to talk about a little bit is the backup big in this instance today, Patrick Gongba. Patrick kind of, I think, looked a little lost at times out there. His hands weren't really there the whole time. He was missing some rebounds, just kind of tapping rebounds, not grabbing them. Couldn't really hold on to the ball in certain instances. But I think as he got more minutes, he got a little more comfortable on the floor, was able to put the ball in the basket a few times. And so I think a nice little contribution from him. But I think from what I saw from him, we're not going to see super meaningful contribution from Patrick, because I'm not sure how many games Duke has left where they can stick him in the game for long periods of time and try to let him work through things. So I think what I learned about Patrick today is that he's good. He can have his moments. I don't expect him to crack a regular rotation at any point this season.
He should get a chance to play some minutes against George Mason. And, Malik Brown, the prognosis, apparently it's a sprained toe. So I wouldn't be surprised if he sits out the George Mason game. And the two beneficiaries of that are going to be Maluach and Gongba. They should get more time on the floor, a little more development time. It's always, a silver lining when somebody goes down with an injury because other people get a chance to step forward and show what they can do. I think the lesson we learned tonight, not from his presence, but from his absence, is just how valuable Malik Brown is to this team, because I think that was part of the issue tonight. We didn't have him on the floor.
So, speaking of Malik Brown, this is a great transition into the next topic of conversation. We have the beloved transfer, Malik Brown, and then now we have the perhaps not quite as beloved amongst Duke fans, Maalik Murphy. So last night it was like getting hit by a high-speed train at a late night announcement that Maalik Murphy is entering the transfer portal. Now, frankly, I'm not really that surprised about it in retrospect, but I guess I was riding the high over the weekend of Duke's in the Gator Bowl. They're playing Ole Miss. I mean, we're talking about like almost in the college football playoffs, Ole Miss. A just fantastic bowl game pool for the Blue Devils. A 9-3 season. Maalik Murphy just had the most passing touchdowns in a single season for a quarterback in Duke football history. Cloud 9, right? And then, oh, wait, actually, he's gone. And so last year you had a really good quarterback in Riley Leonard, who was a transfer, from a major football program and Bama. And then he comes in, becomes a solid starting quarterback at a Power 5, and then he goes and leaves. And now we saw the exact same thing happen with Maalik Murphy. And now, well, it feels like we're just a stepping stone. Which a lot of people say, well, of course we are. Of course Duke's just a stepping stone. But it's like, NIL's made it that way for so many programs, I think, right now. And without regulations on NIL, this sucks to be a program like Duke, because how do you hang on to these guys? Like, I was talking to some people today, and I was like, if Daniel Jones played football in college right now, there's no chance he ends his career at Duke. There's no way he would have ended his career Blue Devil. And that sucks. And there's so many players that applies to. And, I'm not blaming Maalik Murphy personally. I think that, you can go get a bag, you can go get a better role somewhere. Yeah, go ahead and do it, I guess. But this just sucks for the program. Good coach in Mike Elko ups and leaves. Good player Riley Leonard leaves. Murphy leaves. Now, there's also the argument that maybe Maalik Murphy honestly isn't the best player to play quarterback for Duke. And I'd probably agree with that, honestly. I think he has so many limitations that he probably isn't even the best player to lead Duke's offense next season. And they might find somebody better in the portal. But the real problem, I think, from this decision is that, well, if they bring in a new guy to be the starting quarterback next year and he does well and they go 9-3 again, he's probably just going to leave again. And heck, Duke doesn't even have a backup quarterback. Grayson Loftus entered the transfer portal today. And so, before we even touch on the problem of what goes on in the Ole Miss game, Clinton, I want to get your take on Malik's decision to transfer and kind of the broader implications of what that means for the Duke football program and in this era of NIL.
Well, I guess the good news is we have players that are worth stealing. And, the only thing worse than being a stepping stone would be not being a stepping stone, meaning that you don't have people that are worth stealing. And he had a great year. He's capitalizing on it, as you say. He's cashing in. That's new with NIL. People couldn't do that in the past. It's sort of like, what basketball's been dealing with for a much longer period of time with the one and done era, where they go to the pros and that's where they cash out. But here they can stay in college and cash out now. And it's going to be really hard to have continuity in terms of a coach and key players, because you're going to have this constant reshuffling of the deck every year and trying to figure out, who your players are, which, Manny Diaz proved this year he's a genius, at least for this year, and pulling a team together out of nothing. And he's going to have to do some more magic making now, losing both of his quarterbacks, and just the way the world is. So, we could get mad about it and call Malik names, not wish him well and all that. Probably wasted energy because it's the world we live in now.
I don't doubt that Manny Diaz can pull a team together. I think that he probably can, and I think they'll probably do pretty well. But it's just, it speaks to, I think, the difficulty of being Duke football. It was already hard enough. And so now you're having these good seasons, but it's so much harder to make that next step without continuity. And so, like, Duke basketball can deal with it because they have the brand to deal with it. Duke football doesn't have that brand. I mean, Duke football is kind of like NC State basketball. Like, you're gonna lose these decent players, and then what do? You try to build back in the portal, and I mean, is Duke gonna have that miracle Final Four run equivalent of being able to go to the playoffs in football? I mean, I don't know. I mean, probably not. The deck's stacked against them, but you never know, I guess. But this makes it so much more difficult because you never want to have to play the deck every single season and go, can we assemble a team that can compete and compete well in the portal every single year? I mean, can we do this time after time after time, year after year after year? I mean, that's going to get old, I think, at some point. And so that's why I think there has to be some sort of structure in place for NIL to control this a little bit, and maybe help ensure that we get a little more leniency, a little more clarity on what NIL is, and so that it doesn't just destroy mid-level Power 5 teams like Duke.
Well, as you posted on X earlier today, sure would be nice if they kept the portal closed at least until we could play the bowl game and give a team a chance to finish out the season intact, and then open the portal up and let everybody go where they want to go. I'm not sure why we can't do it that way. It would make a lot of sense to at least let the season be intact and then open the portal.
Well, frankly, I think that, they're already struggling so much to keep kind of attention on these bowl games because of how much larger the college football playoffs are now. So to me, it's like, why is Duke playing a bowl game on January 2nd? Why is it that far removed from the final regular season game, especially when the portal's opening? And, somebody made a point to reply to that post that you mentioned, saying that, it has to do with spring enrollment. You can't open the portal later because they're trying to, these transfers are trying to enroll at the new school in the spring, be there for spring workouts, that kind of thing. I get that. I understand that. And so to me, it's like, there's no reason why Duke should be playing that bowl game on January 2nd. There's no reason why Duke can't play that bowl game this Saturday or this Friday. Frankly, I don't see much reason why that's not in the cards and why it shouldn't happen. Heck, they could use those higher level bowl games as a prelude to the college football playoffs. So people might actually care about them, because when you just stick those bowl games in the middle of the college football playoff season, who cares? Outside of the fan bases that are actually watching their teams play, who cares? And so it's like, make those bowl games earlier and then open the transfer portal like after that. And then the portal doesn't, and then like those dudes in the playoffs aren't going to be entering the transfer, or at least, well, some of them might. But I mean, like, you can wait a little bit longer to open the portal and still open it before, the spring semester starts. And so I think that they have to find that balance. And I think, honestly, moving it up would help with engagement for these bowl games, because it's going to be tough to get some engagement here. I mean, just let's talk about the Duke Ole Miss game. When Maalik transferred, I was like, all right, it's Grayson Loftus time again. Then Grayson Loftus transfers, and now I'm thinking I might need to put on the helmet and shoulder pads and run quarterback for Manny, because I'm really not sure what they're going to do here. And who knows how many other players might enter the portal between now and January 2nd. That's a long time. And so let's try to figure out, like, can Duke – well, first of all, was there a path for Duke to win this game even to begin with? I don't know, because Ole Miss, I think, is probably a lot better than are the Blue Devils. But now it feels like I mean, what's the chance that they could even possibly win this game?
Well, that's a shame, to get into a game where you may put in a poor showing, especially now, exacerbated by the quarterbacks leaving. And people's impression will be, oh, Duke's no good. They deserve not to be ranked. Whereas nothing could be further from the truth. They had an excellent season. They had an excellent team. They were one play away from beating SMU. And, but they're not going to be able to represent that now in the way that they should. It's probably not going to be the outcome that we want. And then we're going to continue to languish due to misperceptions about the quality of the program. I'm not sure how to solve all of that. It seems like we're on two tracks in a way. We've got the college football playoffs, and then we have all the other bowl games that are on a different track altogether. I suspect, the timing of it all is people are on vacation, they're sitting around the house, and you probably got more eyeballs watching the games, and that's why they are all clustered around the time period that they are. But some rejiggering needs to happen somehow so that we can play with a complete team and have a more competitive game.
Yeah, something definitely needs to change. Some people need to look in the mirror and say what's working in college football and what isn't. And so we need some sort of maneuver to happen in the coming years so that situations like this aren't happening as frequently. But nonetheless, good luck to Maalik Murphy. Wish him nothing but the best, just like I wished Riley Leonard nothing but the best, and I wish Riley nothing but the best at Notre Dame in the playoffs. But as for the Duke basketball team, things are going pretty well, despite a little bit of a lackluster game against Incarnate Word. If you're turning in your lackluster games against Incarnate Word, well, I'll take that. As long as you play your good ones against the Auburns of the world, it'll be all right. The Blue Devils ranked 4th now in the country with a span of games where they have an opportunity to rack up some wins and really keep things going. Good things for the men's basketball team. The women's basketball team looking solid still as well, a top 10 team. And we'll see what happens with football in the coming weeks. And we'll be there. We'll watch the Ole Miss game no matter what happens. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast wherever you're listening. Go follow Duke Wisdom on Instagram, Twitter, and BlueSky. And we will talk to you.